Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Mark Isix.
And I'm Nick Simone.
How are you today, Nick?
Very good. How are you, Mark?
Phenomenal. Excited to introduce our guest. We have with us today Dr. Mervin Jenkins, a teacher, administrator, and hip hop artist known as Spectac. He has served as an assistant director for a national nonprofit, held positions in the EdTech arena, has been interviewed on NPR, and was named Chatham County Schools Principal of the Year. Additionally, Dr. Jenkins was invited to the Obama White House to be part of My Brother's Keeper initiative. He has authored 2 books, Before They Leave Here While They Are With Us, and To the Beat of Leadership, a story of high and low notes, inspired by his personal journey in education and music. He's also the first guest on this podcast to have charted a single on the Billboard charts. Dr. Jenkins, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for joining us. You've lived so many lives so far in your journey. Did your story begin with music or education?
I like to say it started with music. I was the reluctant learner, I like to say, Mark. So school wasn't something I was the least bit excited about. And it was around 8th grade back in the early 80s. I started hanging out with the guys who were introducing hip hop to the scene, which was very different being in rural South Carolina, you know. So I attached to that, and it literally became the exciting part of me attending school, not for the schoolwork, but knowing that every lunch break I was going to get to wild out with the guys on some freestyles. And that's what we did, man. Eventually, education and the importance of education came into the fold. But I like to say hip hop artist first, educator second.
So when did you start to click better with the educational system?
It was actually late in the college years. I went into college not wanting to be there. You know, the story is when I graduated high school or right before graduation, I told my mom I was going to be moving to Far Rockaway, New York, and living with one of my aunts and chasing a rap career. Her being the school teacher, she wasn't fond of that idea. And we went back and forth on it for quite some time leading up to graduation. And I graduated. I had my Greyhound bus ticket ready for that one-way trip to New York. And like the day before, my mom walked into the room and we got into this huge argument. And it basically ended with me saying, hey, Mom, you know what? I didn't apply to college, so all of my friends have already been accepted. Let me go to New York, chase the music for a year. If it doesn't work out, I'll come back home and do whatever you want me to do. Granted, in the back of my head, I'm thinking to myself, if I get out these doors, you probably won't even see me again. And she came back with a response that simply said, had you applied to college like your friends, will we not be having this argument right now? And I said, absolutely. But since I didn't, she said, okay, but if you did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I said, yep. And my mom reached behind her back, pulled out 2 envelopes, handed them to me. Tore open the first one. It said, Dear Mervin, thank you for applying to South Carolina State University. We look forward to seeing you in the fall. The second one, Benedict College. We look forward to seeing you in the fall. Wow. And I just stood there dumbfounded staring at her. And I was like, I didn't even apply to these schools. And she smiled and said, I know, I applied for you. And there it was. Off to college I went.
Your list of accomplishments is extraordinary, and I know Mark will get into it, but I just have one more question back to the high school year.
Yep.
You know, Mark and I spend most of our conversations talking about ways to improve education on the high school level, and all of Mark's published work is about student engagement. So what was it about high school that, you know, didn't resonate with you?
You know, if you look at the research, it's pretty and I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's been so many variations of it, but they call it the engagement cliff. And what it shows is that around 4th grade, student engagement starts to decline. And there's a small uptick that senior year. And I can tell you right now, having been that student, the uptick for me was just knowing that I had gotten so close to being done. I just got excited about getting out of there, man. It really wasn't a great experience for me. I can't say it was a horrible experience, but I didn't really enjoy it. And a lot of it had to do with those relationships with the adults in the building. And I get it. It's a two-way street, right? Having that relationship. And I certainly didn't play the best part as the ideal student, but as the adult, I've always felt we need to reach further and reach harder to make those connections with young people. So what it did do was set the tone for me going into education, knowing that I didn't want to be that adult. Like I really wanted to make genuine connections with the young people I was working with.
So how did you go about doing that? What's your secret?
For me, it was hip hop, and it's kind of hard to say that. I mean, a lot of times when I'm out speaking, educators go, "Hey, that's great, but I don't know anything about rap, or I can't rap, or that." And I say to them, it's not about rap per se. What do you enjoy outside of the traditional school community? Maybe it's golfing, maybe it is some type of music. It could be video games, it could be acting. Bring that to the table and let your students see that side of you, because you'd be surprised how many students will connect on that level with something you have a personal interest in, and how that changes the dynamics of the relationship in the classroom. So for me, it was hip hop music, but everybody, I think, especially if you've done all the work to become certified in teaching anything, you got a story. We all got a story. Don't be afraid to tap into it. Share it with your students and let them share theirs and find that mutual connection. It's there.
So when did you make the decision to go into education?
Um, you know, when I was in college, I found myself in a situation where I got arrested. Long story, and maybe for another podcast episode. But going through the what they call in South Carolina pretrial intervention, because that's the only way to have your records expunged. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to get my certification in education were it not for that program. But I worked with a great police officer and some other folks in the judicial system. They got me in that program. I completed it. And it was going through that program that a lot of things started clicking for me. I did some community service, working with a local newspaper at the time called Black News, highlighting just like positive achievements of African Americans in the Columbia, South Carolina area and surrounding areas around the state. And I just found the motivation in doing that work and just putting myself in a position where I found another peer group to spend time with and hang with. All of that helped towards the transformation. And last but not least, just having some really solid adults in my corner that was saying, "Hey, man, you can definitely do this." All of that combined made the difference.
Dr. Jenkins, Nick is one of the most brilliant people that I know, but I can never ask him this question, but I could ask you. Who were the hip hop artists who inspired you early on?
The first is going to be Run DMC. When I heard Run DMC, Sucker MC, I knew right then and there this was something I wanted to be a part of. And that was around 1983, I believe, late 83, early 84 maybe. And since then, obviously a list too long to name them all, but just picking a few out of the bunch, I'm going to have to go with A Tribe Called Quest, Pete Rock and CL Smooth, Big Daddy Kane. Moving into today's time, Little Brother, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar. Like that's kind of the pace I like to move when it comes to hip hop. And since I became a part of the industry, for lack of a better term, there's so many subgenres within the genre now. But keep in mind, in the 80s, it was what it was. It was straight out of New York. Other places were slowly catching on, but definitely we've lived long enough to see. I mean, hip hop just celebrated its 50th birthday, last year, and we've lived long enough to see what many adults, when I was a youth, said was just a fad. We know that it now has staying power and it's going to be around for a long time.
Did you connect more with the energy and the beats of hip hop, or lyrically?
It was definitely the lyrics for me. I think in today's music, it's heavily beat driven. If you had to just throw it out there, but there's still a section of folks that focus on lyrics first, and I was definitely about the message. But it doesn't hurt to have a nice beat to go along with it, right?
Well, that's why I like Big Daddy Kane, right? He's
Ab-
underrated lyrically. So is Cool Mo D, by the way. But we could have that conversation another time.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. Both great artists.
Yeah. Well, I remember Cool Mo D and LL Cool J when they had their battles going on, and it was brilliant. Brilliant. It
Yeah,
reminds me a little bit of Kendrick and Drake right now,
I,
or
I
what just
was
happened. Yeah.
I was definitely team Cool Mo D. I think LL won that one though, but yeah, good times, man.
Dr. Jenkins, you don't realize that Mark was mocking my lack of musical knowledge.
No.
That's what that intro was. Although I did know many of the names that you mentioned. I couldn't name, but what
Hey, all good.
yeah, well, that's okay. It's a justified
Exactly.
critic. It's a justified jab at me. But there's so
No, I
many.
think you just took it personally. That's all.
Ah,
No, no. But what I can appreciate, obviously, is the brilliance of so many of these hip hop artists, and it's not even just hip hop. People who are musically inclined, artistically inclined. Why do
yeah,
you think? Why do you think our schools continue to? We say we want to reach, multiple
yeah,
intelligences
yeah,
and learning styles, but we don't do it. Why do
yeah.
you think schools continue? Because you can't. Again, whether you like the music or not, you have to appreciate their genius.
And every time there's a budget crunch, the arts are always the first thing on the chopping block.
Yeah, yeah. So, guys, you pose a great question, and trying to come at it as, I guess, in layman's term, when you become used to something, and when I say used to something, let's think about traditional education. It's really hard to break that cycle. So even down to let's take hip hop and push that to the side for a second. You start talking about financial literacy, health and wellness. These are things that traditionally they just didn't have a platform for in the school system. We're starting to see it more and more, but it's really about breaking the cycle, man. I mean, we all know that once you get into a certain zone and you become comfortable with something, anything that's going to push you out of that comfort zone, you tend to not want to be so open to experiencing, and that's just a mindset. I think some people might say a growth mindset, but that's a mindset that we're going to have to be intentional about and push ourselves to go into those uncharted waters if it is something new for us and be okay. I mean, we do it every day with our students. When we got students in the classroom, we introduce a new project. 9 times out of 10, they've never done it before, but we feel good because we spent the last, whatever, 18, 20 something years doing it. And we feel comfortable as the instructor showing them how to do it. Then why not take that same energy and apply it to things that we might not be comfortable with? I think that's what really transforms the classroom and creates a each one teach one, lifelong learner type of environment, and that's what we want.
But fear usually stands in the way of that, right? So in your role as an educational leader, which you've spent a number of years in your career in that position, how do you help encourage people to overcome their fears?
One of the things I do is when I get an opportunity to go out and train educators, and it could be superintendents, school principals, classroom teachers, but whenever I'm working with this group, for me and my approach, say for instance, the work I do through the nonprofit Life Through Music, I really like to engage the audience in creative writing. And usually that's going to fall in the form of poetry or hip hop. And you got to think, I mean, most of our teachers are still white women across the country. The majority of teachers, especially in the public school sector, that's what they are. And a lot of them, they really hesitate, like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And especially the hip hop side of it. but I really do a walkthrough, engage them in the rhyme writing components, and I usually like to have them get up and perform the pieces that they wrote during the workshop, which always gets a good laugh. Every now and then, people discover that they had a talent they didn't know existed, and it's just a great experience, man. And I like to end that with, okay, you guys saw the amount of fun you had today. Take that same level of excitement back to the classroom. Don't be afraid to embarrass yourself, quote unquote, in front of your students. It's going to build relationships. And that's what you want. You don't want the student walking out necessarily saying, oh, my teacher found out he or she is the greatest MC and just didn't know it. No, I had a great time. We laughed. And I was able to show the teacher how to do something that I could do, but they necessarily didn't know how to do. That's the relationship builder.
Isn't that the same barrier that stands between a teacher and trying a new piece of technology, trying a new curriculum, trying a new idea like you're talking about?
Absolutely, absolutely. The only thing about it, when you start talking hip hop, for a lot of educators, again, that's even a tad bit more of a stretch. You know, you bring in new ed tech, and they're kind of looking at it like, okay, I'm a little nervous about this, never done it before, but it's ed tech. How hard can it be? Turn on the computer, log into the app, and let's go to work. But when you add that component of the hip hop music to it, for a lot of people, it becomes another step, and a huge step for some. So, of course, the idea to be more cautious comes into play at that point.
In your role as principal, and obviously, winning Principal of the Year, what do you think? What characteristics or attributes of yourself do you think contributed to your success in that position?
Well, we're going back a really, really long time, and in Star Wars terminology, a galaxy far, far away. But I will say this: I never underestimated the power of team, and you heard me talk about that earlier. It certainly was far from a one-man operation. When I was a school principal, I was very intentional during the interviewing process to bring in individuals that realize, as adults and even as adult educators, we sometimes put students at risk. And that's a hard pill to swallow. But if you're being real with yourself, you have to know that, yes, although I've been tasked and certified in teaching algebra, whatever the case might be, biology, my words are powerful. And it doesn't take much to totally turn off a student from being attentive, from wanting to be a part of my classroom experience. And a lot of people put on blinders and think because they got the title of teacher, principal, etc., superintendent, whatever, that all comes automatically, and it doesn't. You have to first look in the mirror and acknowledge that I have the potential to do harm to students. And again, that's not easy to say. It hurts me to say it now, but it happens all the time. You all go on your computers right now, you go on the internet, it's not hard to find information where something went left, a student was approached the wrong way, a fight started between a student and an educator. This goes on and on. We see it all the time, and it makes headline news when it does happen. It's unfortunate, but I just think that in my trek as a school principal, being intentional about the adults that were coming into the building and being tasked with working with those students definitely played a huge part in my having that honor of being Principal of the Year for Chatham County Schools when it did happen.
When I hear you say that, Dr. Jenkins, it reminds me when I was much younger, I was like a roadie helping my friend who was a DJ, who would do a lot of different parties, Sweet 16s, weddings, and things like that. And there was a venue in Queens, not far from the old Shea Stadium, and there was a sign in the load-in area, and it was reminding the folks who work there. It said it takes years to get a customer and seconds to lose one. And when you said what you just said, that literally popped right into my head after all these years.
Absolutely, man. I mean, like it's like one of the just natural parts of who we are as human beings. Like what you just said. You can take that same statement and somebody can go outside today, save a kid crossing the street from getting hit by a car, help land an airplane that's out of control, and all it takes is the one bad thing, and all of a sudden that becomes the headline. Everything else takes second, third place, but that bad thing sticks out like a sore thumb. That's just the way it works. So true.
You know, as you were speaking, you so clearly articulated why we need DEI training in our schools. And I unfortunately, too many people that we've encountered haven't, you know, they haven't spoken about it as clearly as you did and as effectively as you did, without even using, you know, the terms.
Absolutely.
How do you respond to because there has just been tremendous backlash, you know, over DEI initiatives, you know, at least on the state level.
Yeah. I don't know how you really have an argument for anything that pushes us to be better human beings. And the only way we can do that is by learning as much as we possibly can about everybody that's coming to the table. You know, for so long, and once again, this goes back to traditional education. For so long, if you didn't look a certain way, have a certain type of income, like you just weren't given a seat at the table. You could stand around and watch, but you couldn't sit at the table. And all of this work, you know, it really deals with, let's get to know one another. That's just the bottom line. Let's get to know one another. Let's embrace the fact that we're coming from different backgrounds, diverse experiences, and let's make that a powerful piece. I like to call it the crayon box effect. You know, if you're tasked with painting a picture, you're not going to probably pull that off with one color out of the crayon box, man. It's going to take a bunch of different colors to really make that thing work and to create that picture you're probably already got imprinted on your brain. It takes a diverse community. That's just it. I mean, anybody thinking otherwise, you're living in the past, and a past that I personally don't want to see repeated.
You know, you mentioned having a seat at the table. You had a seat at a very prominent table not that long ago at the Obama White House. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience in the My Brother's Keeper initiative?
Yep. At the time, I was working with a nonprofit college readiness organization based out of San Diego, and we got the invitation to be a part of a committee that actually had conversations around working with the Hispanic community and specifically with the young males in that subgroup. It was the first time I ever, and who knows if it'll happen again, like got to go in the White House. You know, you went through all the security checks and so forth. And I want to say it might have been the Eisenhower room. I can't remember now, but the big marble floors and huge tables. And a lot of educators from around the country were invited to this. There was, if I remember correctly, maybe about 30 of us in the room. Of the 30, at least 25 were males, Black, Hispanic, white males. And it was kind of a offshoot of that initiative that had begun with African American males. That's where it started at, and they were really trying to branch off and bring that same work into that community, the Hispanic community. And you know, man, unfortunately, turnover happens, and even at the White House, right? And we're looking at the possibility of that happening here shortly. Mm-hmm. But that's just, it's no different than school principal. You know, you think you got a great principal, and for whatever reason, a year or two later, they're gone, someone new is coming in. And when these initiatives come about, unfortunately, they usually live on the backs of that administrator who brought them in. And when the changeover happens, the initiative is probably soon to die out as well. And I think that's what happened with that particular program. But again, man, I just wish we were more intentional, and maybe there needs to be a law passed when an initiative makes it. There's going to be so many years that it's in place, regardless what the changeover might look like. Because a lot of times we lose some great programs, and it's more about the individual. Somebody coming in saying, "No, I don't like Mark, and I don't like Nicholas, and that was their idea. I want to bring my own idea to the
Right.
table." Not even looking at the data to see if it's working. Because if it's working, let's keep doing it.
Right. But priorities shift, budgets then close, and that's that.
And ego on top of it all. Ego.
The title of your book, I mean, it's one of the best titles, Before They Leave Here. No, really, before they leave here, while they are with us. All the stuff you just said about transition and stuff.
Yeah.
Mark and I say this often. The kids in our classroom don't have any time to wait while the policymakers figure things out.
Right.
And just listening to somebody who's as impressive as you, and I'm sure you understand this, there are Mervin Jenkins in our schools all over the country. And what
Absolutely.
what they need are just teachers who can find a way to not allow the red tape and the bureaucracy to prevent them from reaching those individuals.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, your experiences alone could impact so many young people because you were very open and honest about your educational trajectory. You know, if we didn't know that, if we just met you for the first time and said, well, what do you think, you know, Dr. Jenkins was like, oh, you know, probably valedictorian of his class, probably, you know, student council president, probably. but and that's the message that I think teachers have to understand. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about, even just with the DEI. That teachers need to be able to find the greatness that does exist, you know, within all of our students. Even if it's hip hop talent, guys. Sorry, even if it's that.
There it is.
Well, Jay-Z said everybody's got genius level talent.
Hey, man, I like to think and I tell educators, man, you're an expert in something. Like outside of what you went to school to learn, there's something you enjoy doing. Was it crochet, skiing, you know, whatever it is, hiking, mountain climbing, whatever it is, there are students who are interested and they just don't know. So give them a little bit more of the genuine you, and just see what sticks, man. It can't hurt.
And even if they don't like the subject, they'll still be drawn to your passion.
Absolutely. Good point. Great point, Mark. Great point.
Can you explain a little bit more about life through music and its importance for you and the impact that you have on others?
So most times when I operate life through music, I'm invited to convocation, big back to school event. Sometimes it's keynote, sometimes just that 15 minutes on stage to talk with the educators and get them motivated about the upcoming school year or whatever's happening at that time. And when I tell that story from a keynote perspective, I talk about what I've shared with you guys, the fact that a lot of the students that you're serving, they feel as I once felt about education. And it's really tasking my audience to think about that. You know, I remember as a teacher, one of the things I hated most was going into the teacher's lounge start of the school year, because all you got to hear was how many students that they weren't excited about having in their classroom because their brother or sister before them was a hellion, and they know that this student is going to be exactly the same. And in Life Through Music, I try to bridge that gap of, one, let's give every student a fair shot, regardless of what home situation they're coming from, who their relatives were. Let's give every student a fair shot, and let's go the extra mile in trying to make those authentic connections. One of the other things, obviously, because it is Life Through Music, I talk about the impact music can have on learning, specifically hip hop. When you think about it, it is the wordiest genre when it comes to different genre music, rock, gospel, indie, reggae. The list goes on and on, obviously, but it is the wordiest genre. So you're talking about more opportunities for students to be introduced to new vocabulary terms. Like I try to get that message across. And then last but not least, in the workshops, I really divide that up. Sometimes school systems bring me in and they just want me to work with the parents, community. And when I got parents at the table in Life Through Music, I try to take the approach with parents of, listen, these educators are here for you. Let's talk about ways that you can come into the school and not be seen as a distraction, but someone who's there to work with the school body in making sure your student is successful. And that's unfortunately a lot of the work around the parent workshops. The other workshop is specifically for educators. And again, that's really what I said earlier. I talked to them about the whole idea that, yes, as educators, we've been tasked with serving these students, but we can also do the most damage if we're not thinking this through every step of the way. And it's a very fragile package that we've been pretty much given to transform and set up for success. And we have to handle with care. That's the ultimate message there when I'm working with educators in Life Through Music. And then last but not least, sometimes it's solely administrators. Earlier this year, I went and worked with a group of principals from across a school district and a fairly large school district in North Carolina. And while the message is similar, obviously with them, I'm really talking about that administrator-teacher relationship, which if you've been in education, you know that in itself can be a whirlwind. So we try to navigate best ways for school principals and assistant principals to connect and build working relationship with the school body that they're tasked with serving.
Amazing.
While you were saying that, Dr. Jenkins, you were talking about the importance of music. I couldn't help but thinking when a baby is born and it's in its infancy, right? We all talk about the Mozart effect, right? You have to play music. You have to play music. And what you're saying is that it doesn't end in infancy. As a matter of fact, it grows, and you can continue to leverage music to do wonderful things for the academic and cognitive development of a young person throughout.
Yep. I'm gonna be honest. One of the beautiful experiences I had as a young teacher, and we're going back to the late '90s now, mid '90s, late '90s. I was teaching an art history class, and the problem was it was middle school, so there wasn't a curriculum for it per se. But I went to my principal at the time and said, "Hey, versus doing just an art class this year, I want to do art history." And we're talking Title I school, lots of discipline issue. And you could tell by the look he gave me, like, nah, this might not fly. But I said, hey, I really got something here. So thank goodness he allowed me to move forward with it. And to be honest, it turned out to be a beautiful experience. And one thing that I did was I took some of the biggest artists of that time. You still had Tupac and Biggie that were just icons, both deceased by that time, unfortunately. But I was able to talk about, say, for instance, the Renaissance period. And I would take an artist like Raphael DeSanzio, and I would explain to my students, hey, Raphael really lived the life of a Tupac Shakur. Like, he was really into the fancy clothing. He did the partying. Raphael, Renaissance period. If you do the research, he stayed at the big balls. Whatever was happening, he was that dude trying to be there in the mix. And the students gravitated toward that. It was easy for them to sort of remember that. And even during testing time, they would go, that's the guy that's sort of like Tupac, because he loved the fine jewels and the partying and so forth. they were making those connections, man. And again, it turned out to be a great experiment. Um, Flash forward 15 years or so later, I'm living in Atlanta, Georgia at the time, and I get a Facebook message from a student, and he goes, "Hey, Mr. Jenkins, this is so and so, man. I'm actually living in Italy right now,
Get
and
out
I
of
just
here.
want you to know that class you taught us on art history, like talking about the Sistine Chapel. I got a chance to go there and experience it, and it was just like you told us in the classroom. And while it was heartwarming, I also thought to myself, and I said to my wife, this is a great story, but you know what? I've told it so many times, and I've never been to the Sistine Chapel. We're going to Rome this summer." And so,
Nice.
so talk about the each one teach one. I always tell educators, you plant these seeds. You don't. It's not our place to stick around and wait for it to pop up out of the ground. We plant it. We do it with good intentions. We move on. We keep planting, just knowing in our minds that we've done just enough to give them a good start, man.
It's not going to get better than that, Mark. You're not going to be able to top that. That's phenomenal.
No, amazing, amazing. Dr. Jenkins, thank you so much for taking your time out and sharing all these different stories with us and your wisdom and your experiences. Really, such a pleasure to connect with you.
Hey, man, I really appreciate you guys doing what you're doing. As you can see, when your email came through initially, I didn't hesitate on saying, "Yep, let's do it." Um, Maybe this changes the trajectory of somebody out there. It could be a student, could be an educator. Maybe somebody takes what we talked about and apply it to the workplace. Like who knows? But I think this is the type of work we need to make happen as much as possible. It doesn't need to be so many times people are like, "Yep, I'll do it, but here's my fee." And you know what, man? When you can just give back, that's the biggest and the best gift that any of us could ask for. So this has been a gift to me, as it has been for you guys. So
Likewise.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to catch up on previous episodes of State of Ed Podcast, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon. You can also find us on the web at stateofedpodcast.com. We'll also put up links for the show notes based on our discussion with Dr. Jenkins. Be sure to check out Dr. Jenkins' books before they leave here, while they are with us, and To the Beat of Leadership, a story of high and low notes. And you could also check out my book, Forward Fast, Making Sense of Education in an Era of Rapid Change, and I'm happy to announce that I have a new book called Captivate that will be arriving this fall. Nick, thank you so much. Dr. Jenkins, thank you so much for an amazing conversation.